I'm babbling because there is just too much good shit about this book. Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be telling you all about the 5 books that I read for the 2023 Asian Readathon Challenge. So this is a month-long readathon hosted by Read with Cindy that takes place in the month of May and is dedicated to reading more books written by Asian authors. So this year's challenge has 5 different prompts and is loosely inspired by the new movie Joyride. But the twist for these challenges is that each book has to either have a character or an author by a different Asian ethnicity. So I was actually able to read a different book for each prompt, so I got 5 books read for the challenge, which I am very happy about. And instead of focusing on the characters being different ethnicities, I focused on the authors. Okay, so let's get into the books that I read for this challenge. Prompt number 1 was to read a book written by an Asian author. For this prompt, I chose I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai, who is Pakistani. And if you don't know who Malala is, she is a famous activist who pretty much became worldwide famous because she actually got shot by the Taliban on her way to school after fighting for women's rights and women's education in Pakistan. So this book kind of chronicles her life up until that point, but it also chronicles so much more before that and all the things that have led up to this and why she even has to fight for women's education in the first place. So this is pretty much jam-packed with that history and all of the reasons why Malala even chose to fight for women's rights in the first place. So this was really incredibly written, and even sometimes a lot of history reading is hard for me. It was super easy to understand here, and reading this is also a great reminder of how much worse people have it in other places. You know, it's easy to know that things are going on in other places, but it is a whole other thing to read a firsthand experience of it, and it really was eye-opening to just how good I have it here, especially with my education, you know, and you think how, like, when you were a kid, you'd, like, take your education for granted, but there are people who didn't even get that, and I'm always such an advocate for education, and I think education is king, and to know that there are people who don't get an education is just terrible, and, you know, it makes me also want to fight with Malala for education and for the right to education for everybody. And that is why it is so important to read books like this to really understand the things that are going on in the world, essentially, that maybe don't affect you, but that you should definitely care about. And I did rate this 4.5 stars. Prompt number 2 was to read a book featuring a friendship between at least 2 Asian characters. So for this prompt, I chose The Heart Principle by Helen Huang, who is Vietnamese. And this book centers Anna, who is a violinist, but quickly reaches burnout after she has a viral YouTube video of her playing violin, and she experiences a lot of pressure from that. But also, her long-term boyfriend decides that he wants to have an open relationship to make sure that he's not missing out on anything. So she decides that if he wants to sleep around, she's gonna try to do that too, which leads her to downloading a bunch of dating apps, and where eventually she meets Kwan, and that is where the story kind of takes off. So this book, as well as the others in the series, have an entire cast of Asian characters, so there's definitely a friendship between at least 2 of them. So I was honestly really surprised at just how much I love this. I think one of the main reasons that I loved it is because while this is a romance book, it is not the only focus of the book. In fact, there is somewhat of a tragedy that I won't really explain why because I don't want to spoil it, but the book is more so centered and even structured around that tragedy as opposed to the romance. So I really enjoy that it is not just these 2 characters trying to get together. It is also all the things that they have to deal with in life and all the challenges that they come across and how they even come across them together and how that leads them to come together. And in my opinion, this makes it feel way more realistic. I think I really like when romances are realistic. Also, I do have to say Kwan is an amazing book boyfriend, and I'm honestly just surprised at how much I love this book and even the entire series, because romance is my favorite genre, but I've really been getting into it, and this entire series was a 4-star read for me, so definitely recommend it. Prompt number 3 was to read a book written by an Asian author or featuring an Asian character that shows them going on an adventure. For this prompt, I chose Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, who is Japanese. So this book is about Clara, who is an artificial friend, which is basically a robot, and starts off with her in a store with the artificial friends. And it is about kind of how she views the world and also her hoping that somebody will pick her and take her home, and the story basically takes off from there. So this is actually a translated fiction from Japanese. The writing in this was just so absolutely beautiful. The way that Clara just sees the world around her and describes describes it. And it's funny because it's almost from this childlike wonder, because as this robot who has only really experienced the inside of her store, she doesn't really know much about the outside world and about what's out there for her to experience. So all she sees is everything through essentially this window in the store. It's just how she interprets that, and throughout her adventure, how she interprets the other things that she comes in contact with. And it really is just a masterclass in writing, and it's so beautiful. And it says this was the winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, and I can completely see why. This was just absolutely incredible. And it's funny because while this is sci-fi, it also is a bit dystopian, and I'm obviously not going to explain why because spoilers, but the parts of it that are dystopian are so weirdly ominous, but in a good way where it doesn't impact the rest of the story badly. The rest of the story, like I said, has this childlike wonder, and when it does come to these dystopian parts, it's kind of like, oh my god. But it's still written in a way that flows beautifully with the story and with Clara's point of view and how she interprets things. And honestly, this book is going to lead me to pretty much read anything else that Kazuo Ishiguro has written, because once again, the writing in this was just absolutely phenomenal, and this is definitely a 4.5 star for me. Prompt number 4 is to read a book written by an Asian author or featuring an Asian character that is focused on identity and self-discovery. For this prompt, I chose Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, who is half Korean. And this book chronicles Sam and Sadie throughout 30 years of their life and is basically about their friendship and self-discovery and about their love for video games. And honestly, I'm not going to tell you more than that because you should absolutely go into this book not knowing a lot. So I know this book has been everywhere recently, and that is for a reason. This was fucking incredible. This is a new favorite book. This is absolutely one of the easiest 5 stars I have ever given in my life. I could probably go on and on and on about how much I love this book, how incredible the writing was, how incredible the character development was, just the story, the layers to the story, all of it was literally so incredible. I have not been able to stop thinking about this. I read it in 24 hours. It is genuinely just that good. So one of my favorite things about this book was the element of storytelling through video games and through Sam and Sadie's relationship with video games. And as somebody who loves video games, this was so rewarding, and there were so many little Easter eggs that you could pick up on, and it really just made the experience 10 times better. Like, it is just so fun to experience it, and it actually really translates well into literature the way Gabrielle Zevin wrote it. And it even leads to some of the chapters having much more layers than you would anticipate. I'm not going to say much about it, but the NPC chapter has to be one of the best things I have ever read in my entire life, okay? It's just so good. And, this is just, like I said, incredible writing, incredible storytelling, and this is a book that will rip your heart out, but then put the pieces back together. But then rip it out again. But then I'll put it back together again. It is just one of those things. And you just really fall in love with each of the characters. And they feel real because there's so much nuance to their characters. None of them are perfect. They're all individually fucked up in their own ways, but they are so lovable, and you really see all their bad parts with all their good parts, and how each character's bad parts and good parts can come together and create these friendships, but also they have these fights, and who fucked up this time, and who did this, and how did they come back together. It is really just a masterpiece in storytelling and character development. Please read this book. If you're going to read any of these books, please read this one. Prompt number 5 was to read a book featuring an Asian character who is either a hot mess, famous, or eccentric. So for this prompt, I chose My Sweet Girl by Amanda J. Tissa, who is Sinhalese. So this is a dual timeline book about Paloma, who in present day is in America, but recently cut off from her family's funds and is subletting her apartment, and her new roommate suddenly shows up dead in her apartment, and the police are like, what are you talking about? This guy barely exists. What the hell? But it also, in the second timeline, takes place about 20 years earlier when she is still in Sri Lanka in the orphanage, and is about her story getting adopted, essentially. So this is a horror / thriller book, and honestly, I can see why a lot of people wouldn't like this, but I absolutely loved this. This is a 4.5 stars for me, and the reason I love it so much is because in my head it really played out all these campy horror movies that I really, really enjoy. Plus, one of my favorite things in literature is to have an unlikable main character, and this girl is so completely unlikable that I loved her, which doesn't really make sense, but it's true. And to go along with the prompt, she is definitely one hot mess, right? And it's written in this stream of consciousness way where we really get to see her perspective on things and how she kind of views the world. And a lot of times it's kind of fucked up, and she has these really messed up thoughts about people. And also, I thought the ending was incredibly satisfying, but I can see why people wouldn't like it. But for me, it was just cherry on top of the cake. It was so incredible. One of the other good things about this book is the chapters were so short, so it was really easy to get through, and by going through the 2 different timelines about every other chapter or every 3 chapters, it really made it fast-paced and, once again, really easy to read and consume. Also, I gotta hand it to the author because I really thought I had all the twists figured out, and I was just completely wrong. And she took everything that you would almost expect and turned it on his head. So this really just like kept me on my toes. And I just really, really love this, and I will definitely be reading her other book. And those are all the books that I read for the 2023 Asian Readathon Challenge. Let me know if you participated too and what your favorite book from the challenge was. I definitely think mine was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching, and don't forget to take care of yourselves today. Bye!